From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The attempted assassination of Donald Trump on Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania, has shocked the country and also made the country relieved that nothing more serious happened to Donald Trump. We can imagine the cataclysm of anger and retribution had he been seriously wounded. But it's bad enough that a shooter was allowed to get us so close to be able to imperil the life of the former president, and it has shaken up the presidential race. How will this affect Donald Trump himself psychologically in terms of his presidential ambitions? What about President Biden's response and how he will approach the campaign? What about the psychology of the United States and the public as it deals now with a presidential election? Welcome. I'm Paul Gigot with the Potomac Watch podcast here, the WSJ Opinion pages. We're taping from Milwaukee at the Republican Convention, and I'm here with Kyle Peterson and Kim Strassel. Welcome to you both. So the near miss for Donald Trump. Kim seems to have had something of a jolt to Donald Trump, who's now talking about unity, saying he has torn up his planned speech for Thursday and is rewriting it, wants a different tone. And certainly his early comments after the shooting on Truth Social have been models of gratitude and restraint. What do you think?
I think this is both wise and also politically smart, too. Mostly wise for the nation. This was a very volatile situation in that once everyone absorbed this shock, I think that there was the potential for people on the Trump side to become very angry and engage in some violence of their own. So I'm simply happy to see the president come out, express that gratitude, as you said, for those first responders who were there helping him and the Secret Service agents who got him off that stage and locked down the scene. Those were his initial statements. Now we're hearing, as you said, that he's changing his speech. He's going to embrace a unity theme, a strength. Look, we as a country will prevail, to try to draw more contrast with Joe Biden on the policy front. I'm told that the campaign has been putting calls into the speakers who are also supposed to be going up during the week here, especially in prime time, asking them that they generally avoid talking about the shooting or specifically of blaming the left or their opponents for this, but instead to talk about strength through unity and move on. I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One, just for calming the situation. But two, I think the Trump campaign understands that if they make this all about the shooting and that becomes a sort of dominant theme, then it's going to overshadow their ability to use this convention here this week to talk about their policy differences with Joe Biden, which really are quite profound and what all of the headlines have been about prior to this moment.
Yeah, Kyle, I think the former president, like the current one, both are responding to what I think they perceive to be a sense that the country, after this awful event, do want a different tone in politics. And President Biden addressed that 3 times over the weekend, including a rare Oval Office address, and stressed that he said we aren't enemies, we are fellow countrymen, and we need to disagree, but do so without violence in particular. So everybody now talking differently. It's a question of how long it will last. But what did you make of the president's response to this?
I thought they were generally good. I think that everybody seems to be on the same page at the moment about taking the temperature down. And my only comment is I hope it lasts, and I hope that there is some deepening of that sentiment. And I think it would be incumbent on the president to say that a Donald Trump victory would not be the end of democracy.
That's the line I was looking to hear.
It would not be the fall of fascism on the United States of America. And for his part, I think Donald Trump should say that he doesn't think the elections are being stolen. I think there's a lot of heated rhetoric on both sides, deep disagreements on both sides. One solution that I think is not often talked about enough to these kinds of disagreements is federalism, pushing these kinds of decisions down to the state level, to the local level. We don't necessarily have to have national policy on all of these issues on which Florida and Texas as in San Francisco and New York deeply disagree. But I do think that we've fallen into pretty heated rhetoric in the political arena. Sometimes it is meant to be taken seriously and not meant to be taken literally, but it's a big country with 330 million people in it, and not everyone, I think, is always great at grasping the distinctions between those categories of rhetoric.
Well, it's particularly hard for President Biden to now say what I think would be good for the country if he did, which is that Donald Trump election will not be the end of democracy. Our institutions are strong enough to withstand him, so on and so forth. But that's hard for him to say and the Democrats to say because they have built so much of their campaign to date on making precisely that argument. And that leads to the sense of apocalyptic feelings on the part of the country if their candidate loses. And I can guarantee you, I've been in this game long enough, and the candidates I like have won, and candidates I like have lost, and candidates I'm worried about have won. And, we've made it through. And this has not been the most tumultuous time. No, I wasn't alive during the Civil War, though some people say I was. But, that was obviously a much higher stakes and tumultuous time. We ended up getting past that. We always have. I have an idea for Donald Trump, Kim, and I wonder what you think about it, which is if he said during his speech that he will not ask his Justice Department to prosecute his competitor, President Biden, if Donald Trump wins. What do you think of that?
I think it'd be incredibly wise, especially, I would note that amid Donald Trump's comments, and we've had a few now about how he felt in the aftermath of this shooting and some of the details, he also had a new Truth Social post out today commending the fact that this judge in Florida had dismissed special counsel Jack Smith's classified documents case. Now, her ruling was that he was unlawfully appointed by Merrick Garland as special counsel. It doesn't really have to do with the merits of the case, but Donald Trump was talking about lawfare again. And imagine him seizing on that and expanding it and saying, look, I know how it feels to be the subject of a very wide lawfare campaign. And I'm pledging to you that my Department of Justice is not going to go down that route of using its powers to go after any of my political opponents and rule that out. I think it would be a great tone to take, especially in the aftermath of everything that has happened. And it's why people are just so sick to death these days of politics and so suspicious of institutions, is that they see stuff like that. And it's very difficult for them to believe that there's stability in Washington. And that's what we need coming from our leaders at the top right now, because they set the tone.
All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk more specifically about the impact of the near assassination on the presidential race when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal opinion pages, and here on Potomac Watch with Kyle Peterson and Kim Strassel from Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the Republican National Convention. Let's talk, Kyle, go on a little bit more about the psychology. I mean, a life-changing event like this, which is a near-death experience. The image of Trump raising his fist is now worldwide, and I think one of those images that will endure in American history. It is the sort of thing that people who don't pay attention to politics in an active way like we do will notice and say, wow, it's an expression of what people think about Donald Trump, because they think about him as strong. They think of him as a fighter. He said, fight, fight, fight. This will reinforce all of that, and I think have a galvanizing effect on his voters. And the interesting thing I'm going to be watching for is, how does Trump personally respond? Is it going to change him, or is it going to simply be a kind of 48-hour, 72-hour experience?
I agree. And the second image I would add is the one where what looks like to be a speeding bullet is going over Trump's left shoulder that was captured by the photographer at a very fast frame rate. Those images will be in history textbooks, I think. And I tend to agree with you on the political impact. This will motivate Trump's voters to the polls. And I think it will also have some pull on independents, people who are not really tuned into politics. Maybe they are skeptical of Trump. Maybe they like Trump, but they're not a get off the couch and go vote kind of people. I think that there will be a significant amount of admiration for his presence of mind in staying there and raising that fist and saying fight to the crowd, as opposed to just letting the Secret Service cart him off into the car. Whether it's a lasting effect, I think could also be significant, because Donald Trump, I think, even before this event, could have benefited politically by trying to unite the country. His opposition, Joe Biden, is somebody that even Democrats, even independents have concerns about his age. And so the smart thing politically for Donald Trump to do was to run a unity campaign anyway. And now if this is the event that is going to prompt him to do that, we'll have to see what his speech at the RNC is and how long it continues after that. But if he's facing such a weak opponent as the polls suggest he is, then he can run as more of a uniter and try to get more swing votes and independents instead of just relying on his base voters to come out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Kyle says, Kim. It seems to me that there's a real political opportunity here for President Trump and the Republicans to try to expand the coalition beyond MAGA and bring in some of those disaffected Republicans and independents who've been wary of the president because of their concerns about his character and his divisive brand of politics as practiced often in the first term. And we'll have to see how this affects him psychologically. There's some talk now, some people who've spoken to him saying he does seem like a changed man. I don't know. What odds do you give, Kim?
Well, look, Donald Trump is Donald Trump to a certain extent. I don't think we're going to get an end. As I noted that Truth Social post from earlier today, there's still lots of talk about witch hunts and things. So I don't think you're totally going to change him. But yes, of course, you have a near-death experience. It can change your outlook on things. I thought it was quite remarkable that the decision to change the direction of the convention this week, to reach out to those speakers, to change Donald Trump's speech was made by Sunday morning in a call with a number of his campaign advisors. I don't doubt that that has in part to do with Trump's reaction to this and his true gratitude to the way things turned out. But as you said, I think people recognize that there is an opportunity here as well, too. And it sounds as though everyone at the top is on board with this. I think this also highlights the real risk to Democrats, though, at the same time. If you end up having a president who is getting some sympathy because of this situation, who is getting some admiration because of his fortitude in his actions as it happened, who's calling for some unity, and then the response to that is Democrats who are still going on with some of this rhetoric, I think that can be very dangerous for them. Now, the Biden campaign seems to recognize this. They pulled some of their digital ads in the wake of this. He's postponing or canceling some of his campaign events this week. I noticed a Biden campaign spokesman, when they talked about how they were going to handle this week, said that they were going to, quote, draw a contrast between our positive vision for the future and Trump and Republicans' backward-looking agenda. Well, is at least focused on the agenda here and policy, which would be different. Can they maintain that? I don't know, because as you said, Paul, so much of their campaign has been invested in portraying Trump as an existential threat to democracy, and their record is kind of hard to defend right now, so we'll see how that goes.